Welcome to the Social Bee podcast with your host, Louise Brogan. Every week, Louise will be bringing you a podcast all about women entrepreneurs, talking about their challenges, their goals, and inspiring you to either start your own business or grow the business you have. Visit www.socialbeeni.com to join our community and pick up some lovely freebies to start marketing your business online today.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Social Bee podcast. Today I have Mandy Hamerla. Mandy, I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your surname. Hamerla on, who is the virtual HR director and founder of HR Refresh. Mandy's business is about 18 months old and she has got a book published. Everybody, a book on my to-do list, and Mandy's already got it. That's amazing. I'm so impressed. Mandy, welcome to the Social Bee podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Mandy, if you wouldn't mind, could you just really take a moment and introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us about what your business is and what your products and services are?
Yes, absolutely. So hello everybody, my name's Mandy. As you said, I run a business called HR Refresh, and really it helps to educate and empower entrepreneurs and business owners with all things HR, but mostly around hiring people, inspiring people, so getting the best out of your team, and also occasionally, if needs be, firing people.
Ooh, that's a tough bit.
It is a tough bit, but my kind of mantra is, it is part of business sometimes, and if things do go terribly wrong, it's good to know how to do it fairly, respectfully and properly, and within the law. Mm-hmm. And everything really I do is designed to help to build a happier, more profitable business and generally help people to avoid making costly legal mistakes.
Oh, that's excellent. Mandy, how did you get into this as a business?
So I've always worked in HR. I worked as a global HR director for big corporates. So I've always loved being in HR and doing the work I do. And about 18 months ago, I was kind of talking to one of my friends who was running a small business, and she was sharing with me all the kind of pain points she had around managing people and wasn't clear and was a bit confused. So I started giving her some kind of HR support to help her with a few of the challenges she was facing. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed kind of boosting her confidence and helping her think about things differently in terms of how to get the best out of her team and keep people motivated and answering some of the questions she had. And so then I started kind of reaching out to other of my friends that ran businesses and saying, are these problems that you struggle with? Most small businesses don't have an HR department or anyone that they really have to help them with that kind of stuff. And it seemed to be a kind of recurring theme, people just not knowing how to delegate, how to have difficult conversations, how to motivate people, what to pay, where to advertise jobs, all these different things. So I decided to set up alone and, start working with kind of startups and small businesses to provide, just everything from kind of templates and tools to help them through to HR advice and kind of coaching around managing people. And it's also kind of led to me working with a couple of clients kind of being their HR department really. So some have HR teams already, so I go in as the HR director and help them with the strategy, and some have no HR at all, so I come and do the HR bit for them.
So I find this quite fascinating because you had really quite a massive job before, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was, I've done a lot of kind of transformation of businesses. I guess that's where my strengths lie. So taking businesses that are underperforming or there are challenges and helping them to become, high performing teams and, transforming cultures to being, much more positive and productive and profitable.
So when you were a global HR director, what kind of a size in terms of people, businesses would you have worked with?
So when I worked for Pearson, that's a global education company, that's got 40,000 people. And I managed the technology division. So that was around 4,000 people. Then I worked for Argos. I looked after their marketing and commercial and supply division. So all the people that decide what to sell, what to buy in terms of the products. And that was around, that was a couple of thousand as well.
So you've gone from managing teams of a couple of thousand.
Yes. Well, in terms of the HR team, probably the biggest team I've led is around 25 people, and they were based all around the world. So I had HR people that reported into me in India, Australia, America, and parts of Europe.
That's fantastic.
So I've been on both sides of the fence, where I've managed teams and experienced the problems and challenges myself, and then also helped other leaders and other managers to help manage their teams.
And do you find then that transitioning to working with a small business owner who maybe has a team of 5 or 6 people in total, do you find that really everyone has similar issues, just at a different scale, or would you say it's completely different issues?
It's similar but different, and that's what's been great about working with entrepreneurs and small business owners. What's amazing is there's not that kind of bureaucracy or hierarchy to slow things down. Decisions can be made really quickly and really easily, and that's kind of what I enjoy, is seeing the change happen quite quickly. But ultimately, I think many of the issues are the same. Knowing when you're hiring somebody, making sure that you're clear on what you want, and making sure that you think through, there is a real need and purpose for the role. Having difficult conversations. It's, it doesn't matter what job you're in. Knowing the fundamentals of how to hire the right people, manage them brilliantly, get the best out of them. Deal with the problems that come up. It's generally the same no matter what size business you have.
Yeah, so there's just me in Social B, there's just me, but I do have 2 VAs that I work with, that I give pieces of work to.
Yeah.
And my podcast editor, Chris, I don't know if Chris actually listens to the podcast when he edits it, so if you do, hi Chris.
Hi Chris.
Hello. And this year I hired an accountant. So those are 4 people that help me in my business. But they're not employees. So I love in your book, you talk about there's the employee, and there's the worker, and there's the contractor, and you've got this really cool little table. So, sorry, just to tell everybody, you've got a book called Hiring Your First Employee.
I do, yes.
Which we'll link to in the show notes. I mean, it is such a good book. There's loads of there's loads of really valuable content in it, and it's really easy to read, which I love. But you've got this book, or this table, about the differences. And I'm kind of curious, because as an entrepreneur, I would shy away from hiring an employee, because I think taking on the stress of having a monthly paycheck just scares me a little bit.
Yeah. It does a lot of people. And that's why I kind of wanted to write the book, because I think, when you are running your own business, there is a point when you need help, you need to delegate, you want that kind of growth faster, you want that success faster, you need other people to help you get there. But there are choices that you have, and whether you hire a contractor or a worker or an employee is one of those big decisions that that you have to make, and making the right choice is important. And it can be a bit confusing, and there can be lots of horror stories about hiring an employee. So what I wanted to do is write a book about it, based on all the questions that I so often get from people that are hiring their first employee that I work with, and kind of, help people to feel more empowered and educated about the choices, and help them to make that right decision for their business.
And I suppose that regionally, the laws will differ for everybody. So we have listeners I got an email from a listener from Texas yesterday. So obviously the laws vary from country to country.
Yeah.
For example, if I was to take on an employee, do I have the right to say to them, okay, you're on trial for 3 months, or is there a law that binds me to how long I can do that for?
So for the UK, we have probation periods. I won't try and go too much into the law bit, but because probations don't technically exist in law.
Okay.
But if you hire somebody, you can decide what you want that trial period to be. So it could be 3 months or 6 months, as long as you set it out at the beginning. And it's a trial period in the sense that if it doesn't work out, there is a process you need to follow. But if it does all go horribly wrong, there's a kind of a get out clause to say to that person, it's not working, and therefore, your employment is terminated.
I think part of my fear comes from, I've talked a little bit about my dad before in the podcast, but my dad had his own business with his brother, and they had a couple of issues with, say, that somebody fell out with one of the workers and just told them to leave. And they ended up in court a couple of times. Yeah. And I think that probably would forever put me off.
And that's what I'm saying. There's so many horror stories, there's so many, everyone knows someone that's been sued by someone. Yes. And, obviously in some countries, there is very much, a lawsuit culture. The UK is becoming a bit more that way, with kind of no win, no fee type, approaches. So, I mean, it is scary, but I think, and that's what I aim to do is educate and empower people on what you can and can't do in terms of the law, because, you obviously have to run your business and you need to have the right team, the right people, the right structure to be able to do that. But knowing how to deal with those problems in the right way, in the legal way, and in a fair and reasonable way is just important.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also there's a time and a place, isn't there? Hiring an employee is not for every business. It's not right for every business. So, it's great if you're looking for kind of the long-term investment. You want to have much more control about how somebody works and when they work. And, but it's, if you have a business that's fluctuating each month in terms of how much you earn, then having the commitment of paying somebody's salary every month, which you would have with an employee, is not necessarily the right option for you.
Yeah. Let's look at the difference between having an employee and having a worker, because I think from scanning through, I just looked at the book. I have read the book, but I looked at it there before we came on, and I think you were suggesting that a worker, you don't necessarily, is that like the 0 contract hours? Is that a worker?
Yeah. Okay. So it's a bit confusing, but in the law, there are kind of 3 main buckets of people that you might hire. There's an employee who has full employment rights. They work for you for set hours per week for a set amount of money. And you give them a job and they do that job to the best of their ability. So that's kind of bucket 1. Bucket 2 is a casual worker. And this is kind of in between an employee and a contractor, in that they get some rights, more rights than a contractor, but less rights than an employee. And typically, that would include something like a 0 hours worker, which can get a bit of a hard time in the press, but it does have its time and its place if it's right for the business. So that might be having somebody on a 0 hours model, and then they work, they might work for you 10 hours one week and 4 hours the next and none the next. So it's a very much flexible basis. So you really only pay them for the hours that they do. And then you've got a self-employed contractor that you might bring in, often like a virtual assistant, sometimes social media, sometimes HR, and they do work for you, a set project or, something very specific and niche, but they also have other clients, and they kind of fit your work in around other things that they're doing. So they're the kind of 3 main buckets.
Yes. So I just wondered why somebody would so as the employee, why would you want to go for the worker? Is it what right? You get more rights as a worker, is that why, rather than a contractor?
Yes, you do get more rights. So generally work, it might be a student or something like that. So as an employer, as a business owner, you would put them on your payroll most times. And it might be you'd hire somebody on a 0 hours worker. If you've got a business that kind of has peaks and troughs. So say if you've got a restaurant that you run, and you need, Christmas is a really busy time because of all the Christmas parties, and you want to hire some extra help waitresses to cover kind